Okay, so basically the client called and he is making a feature, and in it he needs an MRI box. So it has a hint of a sci-fi theme to it, but it's still very grounded, very down to earth. So the client wanted just a small box, very simple looking, but it has to look like a piece of medical equipment in a sense. Very sterile, white, clean lines. The best way that I thought of doing it was to create a box and vacuum form it so I could have very smooth, rounded edges and something that looks clean and simple, but still has that element of something of a piece of equipment. You could go to like a thrift store and probably find a piece of kitchen equipment or a piece of electronics or something like that that kind of looks like something. You can kind of convert it into whatever you want. But what the client wanted was actually very, very simple in a sense. It was just a box, and his dimensions he was kind of open to, kind of within that frame of maybe like 8 inches to 12 inches. So I compromised and just went to 10. It had to have just one function button. It was like a very simple, just clean box with a screen and one function button, and that was it. He didn't want any kind of detailing on it or a logo or anything that kind of distinguished it. He kind of wanted it to have an ambiguity to it that lent it, gave it a bit of a mystery, sort of. I didn't want to necessarily pull like an object off the shelf, like an old toaster or something like that, or a little oven, something that was going to be too recognizable, even if I cleaned it up or I dressed it up, and changed it enough to where it would look different. I feel like you still would be like, oh, you know what, that's, my aunt has that toaster in her basement, you know what I mean? I would rather go with a completely clean slate and create the box completely from scratch. That being said, I did up some sketches. My first ones were probably a little too complicated, and then I kind of worked back. He did leave, some creative license. He's like, come up with some ideas and show me what you got, and I'm sure, whatever you come up with will be cool. So I sent him some sketches, and we talked back and forth and got feedback. And basically, this is my last sketch, and it's very, very simple. It's a lot less complicated than some of my first sketches. What I'll do is I'm going to sculpt the box out of MDF board, which is like a pressed board, basically. You can get very clean cuts out of it and sand it very smooth. And it's pretty easy to work with. So I think that's what we're going to do. The other thing is then we're going to, like as I said, we're going to use the vacuum form machine. Now I know you're probably like, I don't have a vacuum form machine, and how the hell do you build one? Well, there actually are a lot of tutorials online on how to build your own makeshift kind of vacuum form machine at home. And it's really actually very simple. If you have like a high power vacuum or a shop vac or something, and you need a heat source, the rest of the stuff you can basically just build on your own. I may do a tutorial in the future of how I built mine, but like I said, there are a lot of tutorials on YouTube and stuff like that that are very simple and very easy examples of how to build a vacuum form machine. So we're just gonna measure out our basic box and cut it out of the MDF board. And then, yeah, we'll go from there. Now once I made my measurements and my cuts, I only had to make one side of the box because I could just vacuum form that same shape 4 times and have my 4 sides, and the bottom was going to be an extra piece of ABS plastic, and the top was going to be a lens or a piece of acrylic that the light could shine through. So I doubled up the 2 pieces and rounded off the edges and the corners to give it a nice round shape. And there you have it. Okay, so now that we have our form and we've got it on the table, we're going to be using, as I said, ABS plastics, thermoforming plastic. There are a couple different kinds. Styrene and ABS are the most common, and you can get them in black, white, or clear. Obviously, we're going to use white because I want that look. This has got a nice, ABS has a little bit of a glossier, shinier finish, and then the other side has a really kind of rough texture. So this will be the inside of our form, and this will be the outside of our form. Yeah, you just take this, my machine is set up for 24 by 24 sheet. You can make a smaller thermoform machine, that does 12 by 12 or 12 by 16 or whatever. You can buy sheets in various sizes, or you can buy them real big and cut them to whatever customize you have, however you want. I built my machine because I want to do some larger pieces and smaller pieces. So the board actually comes out, and I can replace it with a smaller one. And you can buy sheets then in either 12 or 24, just easier. I don't have to cut them then. So I'm just going to stick this into my frame. So my frame is basically just that. It's just 2 pieces of plywood that I cut the center out of, and then using a continuous hinge or a piano hinge on one end and some fasteners on the sides, you just tighten it down. And I've got some weather stripping on the inside of the frame to kind of hold the plastic into place. That's it. Alright, so we're ready to go. Got our substrate, we got our positive or the model, whatever we're going to make the vacuum form. So let's put this in here like this. Put it in place. Turn on our heat. Alright, now this is, I use basically just a garage heater. It was like $50 or something. And I created this box that's lined with aluminum foil. And it's got a little bit of a reducer to it because the space heater or the garage heater that I have is like 24 inches by like 12 inches maybe. So I had to kind of reduce it on either side so it kind of fans out. And then I created this box so I could insulate it, put some insulation in there. So the heat is all directed down towards our substrate, which the ABS we're using, and I'm using a 1/16 thickness, which has got a nice rigidity to it. So it's going to be a nice hard plastic. It's not too thick to where we can't get a good mold or a good vacuum seal over it, but it still has a nice rigidity that it'll create a nice hard box. If you're going to be doing vacuum forming to create, you know, like an armor or something, if you want to make stormtrooper armor or something like that, 1/16 is probably a pretty good thickness, I would say. If you know, you might go a little bit thinner, it's going to be a little bit cheaper. If you use styrene, that's a little bit cheaper, but it's also it's not as sturdy as ABS, I don't think. So we're going to wait for this to heat up. It should take about 7-8 minutes for this heat source. It kind of depends on what you're using. But then once it heats up, we'll drop it down over our vacuum box, turn on the vacuum, it's going to suck the air out, and the plastic will form over our positive. So it's just a waiting game now. Okay, it's got a pretty good sag going. It's pretty soft, looks like. So thing is, you don't want to wait too long and have it burn a hole or melt all together and fall onto your table. That's not going to be good. So I think we're pretty good. Turn on the vacuum. That's it. Now I just cut my form out with the plastic using my rotary tool and then sanded the edges down. Then once I had it all sanded down, all the edges are clean, I glued the box together using a 2-part epoxy that it bonds really well to plastics. And as you can see, there it is, just curing. Didn't have to be too clean on the inside because you're never going to see the inside. The top is going to have a clear acrylic lens that the light can shine through. So, using a simple socket, some extra wire, and a button that I have, I just wired it up using an old extension cord as my plug. Shop light. A red bulb from Home Depot. Pretty simple. Test it out. Works. Then, as I said, I used a piece of acrylic for my lens. So you don't want to see the light bulb, so use a frosted acrylic. That's a completed piece. All in all, it turned out pretty well. The client was happy. And the footage that you're about to see is footage that they provided for the film Synthetic Love. I still haven't seen the film, but basically I think it's like a dark romantic comedy with some kind of sci-fi type element with the whole like portable MRI machine. Obviously this is a very simplified MRI machine. There's no attempt to make it literal in the sense that it has to be believable. It's just a plot device. Alright, so here's the completed MRI box. The client said that I actually didn't have to put a battery in it, it could just plug in, so that simplified things quite a bit. I had the parts already, so it's just that simple socket. You've got your positive and negative on either side. I got plenty of black and white wire, an extension cord, or a piece of cable or something like that, or an old power cable to something that doesn't work anymore, and just cut it off. I keep those around because you never know when you might need it. So yeah, and the switch was just in a bag full of switches that I have. I collect switches, all kinds of switches, when parts and stuff like that break down, or electrical equipment. Sometimes I just go and buy switches at American Science and Surplus or the hardware store or something. If I see a cool switch on an old piece of industrial equipment or something like that, I'll take it off. A lot of times, yeah, they still work. The switch is still good. Test them. But I've had this switch sitting in a bag of switches for years and wanted to have a use for it, and I think it kind of fit this perfectly. He wanted a switch that was very much like a video game button, and I actually have one, but this I thought was a little cooler with it actually had the metallic tightening nut on here. I used just that metallic tape to cover up my seams. I know, it's pretty cheap trick. So this is it. Simple, completely dimensional. Got the different faces. I want the face of it to be completely clean. I didn't want any embossment or any raised elements on the face of it. I wanted that to be the most ambiguous part of the piece. And yeah, like I said, it's very simple. Just a simple white box, but with rounded edges and ends, so it looks very clean. It's got a nice gloss to it, and yeah, lights up. Your home MRI machine.